Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome back to another Ilm Feed podcast with your host Shabir Hassan. And I hope you are all doing well, inshallah. And I'm really excited about today's episode. We have a dear brother with us whose story, I promise you, is inspiring to say the least. He has a journey that he's going to be taking us through, and it's just one of those podcasts that if you just skip or you stop listening, then you're just going to miss out a great deal. Okay, so I want to introduce our guest for today, our dear brother Jody McIntyre. Assalamu alaikum rahmatullah.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
MashaAllah.
Nice to be here.
Nice for you to be here, and a pleasure to host you, honestly. I know we've been talking about, arranging this for some time. Alhamdulillah, you happen to be in London today.
No, it's finally happened.
Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah. How have you been?
Alhamdulillah, everything's good.
Yeah?
I'm loving life.
MashaAllah. And I can see that, genuinely. I can see that. I mean, so here's the thing. We only got, I would say we recently got connected on social media via Instagram. So that was more of a recent thing. But, however, I wouldn't say that this was the first time I've come across you, or the first time I've probably interacted with you. I don't think it was. Even though it was only a few months back where I started seeing, mashallah, more of your work, and we're going to talk about that. But let me just take you back a bit. So I think 2010, 2011, around that time, I was in college at the time. So I was doing my A-levels at the time.
Yeah.
And I always used to follow the work and the activism of Loki.
Yeah.
Right. So through him, I came across you.
Okay.
And so we're talking about a good 10 years ago now. Obviously, mashallah, you're much younger. Not that you're old now, but, much younger, much like myself. And I was following your work because you were also, a very, keen activist. You were doing a lot of good work, mashallah. And I just remember, I can't remember if we were like Facebook friends or something, but I was keeping up to date with a lot of things you're doing, your journalism, your activism, and so many things. And then I clearly remember there was this terrible incident which you were involved in, where you attended a protest, and it was all over the headlines because obviously you were in your wheelchair at the time, and what happened was there was a lot of controversy because we could say you were dragged right out of the wheelchair.
Yeah, I think
and there was some footage there that was available to see you literally being on the floor, and it was shocking for a lot of people to see. It's like,
it was shocking for me, let alone you.
I mean, that's what I'm trying to say. Imagine for us seeing it was shocking. So I can't even imagine what that experience was like for you. Let's start with that, actually. Going back, because it was a while back now.
Well, I think what's interesting is that what got even more attention than the incident itself was an interview that I took part in a couple of days afterwards on BBC News, which was a live interview, and it was quite interesting because, I had a long day of a number of different interviews with Sky News and ITV News, a number of channels, and they were all in the same building in central London. And just before I was due to go home in the evening, I was feeling very tired. They said, we want to do one more interview, a live interview on BBC News. And I was quite reluctant to do it because I was just a bit exhausted from the day. And they said, it will only take 1 or 2 minutes. It's a live interview, and it will be seen by a lot of people. So I said, okay, let's do it. The interview ended up lasting for, I think, almost 10 minutes.
Okay.
And the interviewer was very hostile. Subhanallah. So it's this interview that I think most people remember. And also I tried to mention what I perceived as the BBC's partiality or bias in reporting on the on the occupation of Palestine, and I was my answer was cut off very quickly. So it's amazing, really, something that in this day and age, just that someone happened to be filming the incident, and then it ended up on the news. Literally. So you mentioned my friend Loki.
Yeah.
He said that for 24 hours I was world famous.
Well, literally, it was all of us. It was all of us.
It was a big story because I think sometimes, we have a society where there are some prejudices. A lot of people do face discrimination and do face prejudice and do face, even you could say, a kind of oppression. But I think that I always say that a lot of people actually find it hard to believe unless they have directly experienced it themselves. And I think racism and discrimination towards disabled people are two really good examples. If you think about racism, there are so many outrageous stories that you hear that I think a white person or someone who has never faced racism would just not believe that this can happen in the society we live in, which is a civilized society in so many ways, but then in some other ways really quite appalling.
Yeah, of course, subhanallah. And that's one thing, one thing you just mentioned there, is the prejudice that is faced by many people, especially in the disabled community. And so one thing that you have, we could say, struggled with, we were just talking about it just before we started, right? Even subhanallah, from a young age, again, someone like myself, I can't relate to your struggle, and perhaps on some levels you can't relate to my struggle, and that's just how it works, right? Allah tests people in different ways. And you mentioned the condition is cerebral palsy. Am I saying it right? Yeah. So tell us a bit about that, and your struggle, even as a child, subhanallah, even those first steps that you're trying to take. How did that affect you?
Literally. Taking first steps.
Literally.
It was a big struggle. Subhanallah, one of the things we're taught as Muslims is to look for signs within ourselves. Sometimes Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala might give someone hardship or difficulty in order to test them. So if I look at my own life, alhamdulillah, very shortly after I was born, just a matter of minutes or a number of minutes after I was born, I stopped breathing. So my parents noticed that my body was turning blue, and they called the midwives or the nursing staff, who came rushing, and alhamdulillah, by the will of Allah, they managed to resuscitate me. And there's a strong possibility that during that time, that short time of not breathing, that could have been a contributing factor or cause of the physical disability, or whatever you want to call it, that I have. So it's something amazing, is it? Like, when I look back on it now, to think that within the first few minutes of life, I was, you could say, I'd stopped breathing. You think of a human being that stopped breathing as dead, basically.
Yeah.
And subhanallah, sometimes I reflect on that when you read. There's a lot of references in the Qur'an to the fact that just as Allah brings, sometimes the earth in winter becomes dead, and then in the spring Allah brings it back to life and things start growing again. It says human beings, just the way he gave us life, and then we will all experience death when we go to our graves, and then we'll all experience life again in the akhirah. So subhanAllah is something to reflect on, it's something we always remind ourselves and always remind each other. But I still think it's worth repeating and worth thinking about, that this life is a short test. Not even a long test, say a short test. Like when you have an exam, it's stressful, you revise for it, you work hard, and then when you go to sit the exam, just as soon as you've started it, it feels like it's over. So alhamdulillah, in terms of having a disability, the way I like to look at it is that any of us, whether you have a disability or not, this body that you have now is something temporary, something you've just got for a short period of time. And that's why I think it's important for people to not judge people on their appearance or their skin colour or whether they have a disability, because not only is it, morally wrong, but also it's so short-sighted to think that this person's body, this person's physical outer appearance is representative of them as a person. And especially as Muslims, it's very easy for us to say verbally, yes, we believe that everyone's equal and that Allah created everyone, but do we put that into action?
Exactly, yeah.
Do we implement that intention? So for example, if you've got a daughter, if you've got a son, and a brother or a sister came and asked to marry your daughter or your son, and they had a disability, or they were black, or they were a different ethnicity to your family, would you put that belief into action, or would it suddenly be something that's not okay? SubhanAllah, especially as Muslims.
You know what's very interesting is the two things that you mentioned there, which is racism against people of color, and then you have prejudice against people with a disability. I don't know, I'd never thought of it like this, but it just reminded me right now of the two mu'adhins of the Prophet ﷺ.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
You have Bilal ibn Rabaha, okay, Abyssinian, okay, a freed slave, and he was the main mu'adhin. Who's the second mu'adhin of the Prophet ﷺ? Abdullah ibn Maktoum. And he was blind. He had a disability. And these were the two mu'adhins of the Prophet ﷺ. They were promoted to this high station and honorable position, just showing that we can obviously, and many Muslims use this as a very basic example, and they sometimes even use it to just kind of cover up their passive racism, right? But no, what we're saying is that the Prophet ﷺ clearly, he saw more than what we're talking about here, right? He saw more than just something which is external. He saw more than someone's physical. He saw that these people are, have something to contribute. These people have something that they can give to this community for the sake of Allah, and the Prophet ﷺ demonstrated that. So it was just random. Whilst you were talking, that was the first thing that came to my head, subhanAllah. And there's a social media post going around actually, just very recently, about how in the Arab world, someone took a picture of this sign for disabled people, but it doesn't say disabled people. The word that is used in Arabic is ashabul himam, so meaning the people of determination, right? And that was just being shared around, showing that there you go, like these people, we don't see them as someone who's just less able than us. No, in fact, these are people who are way more determined than us. And honestly, I see you like that. The amazing work you're doing is absolutely amazing, and the way you've alhamdulillah, overcome any struggles, any tests that Allah has placed you with, you've come out on top of that.
I think that's, I hadn't seen that picture that you mentioned, but I think that's really nice.
Yeah.
I think they should adopt that in the English language.
Definitely.
Because I always think that it's strange how some inabilities are classified as a disability. As in, if you can't do this, it's medically or socially classified as you have a disability.
Yeah.
But everyone is disabled to do something.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
No one's able to do everything. Some people find it difficult to learn languages.
Yeah.
Some people can't swim. Some people can't ride a bike.
Mm.
Someone couldn't ride a bike, you wouldn't say they have a disability.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And that the Arabic translation that you mentioned, yes, that's what it is. It's like just to live your life, or just to, it's what I think is a struggle when you have a disability. It's not necessarily the big achievements, because I think people get very inspired when you see someone with a disability and they've got a degree, or they've got married, and mashallah, these are big achievements. They shouldn't be belittled, but the thing you have to struggle is the everyday tasks.
Yeah.
Just trying to live your life independently. Everyone gets tired. Imagine you've got a physical disability as well.
Yeah.
Some things take more time, take more effort. So that's what I think is nice to be recognised in that way. That determination, that effort, mashallah. Everyone's facing their own struggles.
Alhamdulillah. It's amazing, bro. Honestly, it's and I'm so glad that you reached out on social media and I came across the amazing work you're doing. And I want to just come back to the question, because you mentioned a few times is prejudice. Did you face that in your over the years? Is that something that you've had to battle and come to terms with? And do you have any examples that maybe you could even share?
I'd say, as someone with a disability, growing up and living in the UK, yes, I've always faced discrimination, and sometimes, maybe it's frustrating when people don't believe you, or they say, often I'm talking to someone and they say, I don't understand why someone would treat you differently, or be rude, or actually be rude to you, just because you have a disability. And my response is, I don't understand either. If I understood, I would I wouldn't be talking about it in the first place. But it's a general thing. I remember as a child, alhamdulillah, now I'm an adult.
Yeah.
I drive a car which has given me a lot more independence, and also I think has shielded me from many instances where I used to come across rude people with some kind of prejudice. So even to me, thinking about it now is something amazing. Why of all sections of society, disabled people, what put that in your heart, that you get so frustrated and so angry with someone that's in a wheelchair? Something I'll never understand, subhanallah. But yeah, in general, I can say, I'll give you a very good example.
Yeah, sure.
When I was at sixth form, I used to use a wheelchair, electric wheelchair, and get a bus to school.
Okay.
And every single morning, I'm not exaggerating, I'd say 99% of mornings, the bus, or one or two or even three buses, would either not stop at my stop, or say we don't have space for you, or argue with me, or cause some kind of, scene about me getting on the bus, or say, why can't you wait for the next bus? And what's worse than that is that when I tried to argue back, other members of the public would start arguing with me.
No way.
Why are you wasting my time? I'm
way.
trying to get to work. We've got places to go.
This is London, yeah?
this is in London, and bear in mind, I'm not that old, Alhamdulillah, we're talking about 10, 11, 12 years ago, and even I can see in your face that you're shocked and you're surprised, and that even I'm surprised, and that I'm the one that happened to. And when I look back on my life, you know, like, you can easily, I think as a human you have that natural propensity to adapt or become accustomed to the situation. But when I look back on it now, it's so incomprehensible. Like, how is this happening in the 21st century? And to be honest, something that I think will shock people, and I don't want to say this in a confrontational or accusatory way, but I have travelled a lot in the world. Alhamdulillah, I'm really lucky, I'm really blessed. I've been to countries in Africa, countries in the Middle East, countries in Southeast Asia, South America. I've literally travelled all over the world, alhamdulillah, including to many countries that maybe will be classified as third world countries or developing countries. And the UK, where I was born and I grew up and lived all my life, is one of the worst that I've encountered in terms of discrimination against disabled people. I don't know why that is. I'm not saying it's everyone. I'm not saying maybe it's not even still the case today. I think things have changed massively in my lifetime. I remember my mum telling me that when she wanted to enroll me in a primary school, and my parents were really determined that I'd go to a mainstream school, as in not a schools specifically for people with disabilities. They said, you know, Jody's a normal boy, why can't he go to a normal school? She said it was very difficult to find a school that would accept me.
Wow.
To literally find a primary, can you believe that? To find a primary school that would accept me because I had a disability. So I'm guessing, Allahu A'lam, that would not be allowed today. I'd be shocked if that was allowed today. I'm sure that isn't allowed today for a mainstream government funded primary school to say we're not, you know, he's too disabled. So, you know, things have changed a lot in my life, even just within my lifetime. I think people's attitudes have changed and are continuing to change as well, a huge amount. But we're still only talking about within the last 25 years, basically, 25, 30 years. And it's, as I said, it's something I think even you find it shocking, and you knew that we're going to talk about it. So
exactly.
It's something, subhanAllah.
It's crazy. I mean, to be honest, I didn't even expect those kind of examples. I had no idea, at all. But like you said, I mean, I think slowly, though there's still a lot of work to be done, slowly things are changing. Like you said, the perception is changing. Even like when you go to like car parks, for example, where there's disabled bays, you will see signs now saying like not all disabilities are visible. So they're making that quite clear now, which that is interesting, because it's true. You know, when we think of a disability, you think, oh yeah, you know, naturally you're going to see someone with you know, a wheelchair, or you're going to see someone with a walking stick. But no, there's actually, like, I was even surprised to find out that having like severe asthma, severe asthma is classed even as a disability. Right, so some asthma is something I've struggled with for a long time. But not on, alhamdulillah, it's improved since I was a kid. Not on that level.
You haven't quite got to that level.
Yeah, alhamdulillah. I hope I don't, because you know, as a kid, asthma attacks were. But it's interesting, because if you saw someone with asthma, I mean, physically looking at them, like, you would never be able to tell, right?
You wouldn't.
So I think it's good that people are kind of raising awareness about these things, and I'm glad that we're having this discussion, because I'm sure a lot of people listening right now and watching this it's going to open up their eyes.
I remember you were mentioning around 10, 11, around 9, 10 years ago, when I had a number of media appearances and interviews. You know, obviously online and with social medias, you get a lot of quote unquote haters. And one of the comments that I saw a number of people making, derogatory comments or negative comments, was, oh, you know, this guy, I saw him walking, or I saw him standing up. Why is he pretending to have a disability?
Are you being serious?
I'm being 100% serious. Even I'm being 100% serious. There was, and you know, it's like, subhanallah, you know, as a society, you know, it's really strange to me. But you're right. I guess it is born out of ignorance. And the only way you challenge that, I think, is through education. And I mean, it's amazing. Like I think nowadays you certainly see a lot more disabled people in the public eye, or you know, on television or whatever it is.
Alhamdulillah. I want to ask you something, actually. So going back 9-10 years, right? When I said you're making those media appearances, right? Were you at this stage a Muslim?
No,
you weren't.
I wasn't a Muslim.
Okay, so when did you come to Islam?
So alhamdulillah, I became a Muslim, let's say 2012.
Okay.
Yeah, 2012. So just, I remember because it was just before I travelled to Venezuela.
Okay.
So I became a Muslim, and then, you know, what does everyone do when they become a Muslim? Go and live in Venezuela, mashallah. Come on, man.
Yeah, wow, okay.
Venezuela.
Where did that come from?
Well, to be honest, the trip was already booked.
Okay, fair enough. It wasn't like part of the initiation process.
It wasn't like, oh.
Right, you become Muslim and you have to go to Venezuela. First mission.
I thought that's what everyone did. No, the trip was already booked. I was working as a journalist, alhamdulillah. So, but that's how I remember. So it was around 2000.
So about eight years or so. Roughly 8 years or so. And, okay, interesting. So it was a couple of years after, you would say, those, you know, that your 24 hours of fame, as Loki put it, right?
Yeah.
Those media appearances. Okay, so what was it then? Because I'll be honest with you, even when I saw you back then, I saw you as a man who had the values of what Islam promotes. Alhamdulillah. What you were standing up for and the work that you were doing was exactly what Islam promoted, but I knew you weren't a Muslim. But you know, the thing is, even was it the Prophet ﷺ? He said when he came across Khalid ibn al-Walid, right? He always said, a man like Khalid, as intelligent as him, it's impossible for him not to become Muslim. Because he has the skills and he has the intelligence. So for me, looking at you, I was like, this guy has everything, you know, that he has all those values. So what was it then?
You know, something very interesting about Islam, or someone being born a Muslim, someone becoming Muslim, that you're right, intelligence is a big part of it. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala always encourages us in the Qur'an to reflect, to use our brain to think about things. But there's also iman, belief, faith, that is such a key part of our deen, subhanAllah. So maybe, without trying to sound arrogant, inshallah, I hope I had some intelligence, but maybe I was lacking the iman, you could say. And honestly, it's very difficult for me to give you a definitive answer that this made me want to become a Muslim. That all I can say is that whether it's through activism or journalism or reading or writing articles or doing interviews or travelling, all of these things I was doing, I think maybe I was always looking for the truth in things.
You're looking for answers.
And
especially I can imagine as someone who's a journalist.
Yeah.
A journalist is always researching, looking for answers, right? So you have that nature.
You want to know the answer to things. That's what it is to be a human.
Yeah.
You're searching for answers. Why are we here? What are we doing here? What's our purpose? Why am I living now? Like, what is the reason for Jody McIntyre, Shabir Hassan? Why are we here? Why are we in this world?
Yeah.
And also, you could say that having experiences like travelling to Palestine, living in Palestine, seeing suffering, seeing oppression, it makes you question the official narrative or the story you've heard in the news, perhaps more so than if you just stayed in the place you were born and never really saw another side to the story.
Yeah.
So that's what I think. I was always looking for the truth. And one other thing that I've reflected on a lot, and I think for many, this is just my opinion, but I think for many people, whether consciously or subconsciously, is a big stumbling block. And even me, I probably have suffered from this in the past, is that I think we have to think to ourselves, if I'm wrong about something, even if I've believed something for 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, if I find out evidence or something compelling shows me that what I've been doing and what I've believed in is wrong, I have to push my ego down and not have the arrogance to reject something just because just because I didn't already know about it. That is something really hard.
So important.
I still find it hard now. If you're, it might not be as life changing as Islam or no Islam, but if you've had something that the last couple of years you were sure this is true, and then someone comes and says, "Look at this, you were wrong." It's hard.
Yeah.
Hard. The ego is telling you, you thought you were right, so just keep arguing.
Yeah.
And to be honest, like, I never, I never had any bad feeling towards Muslims or any bad feeling towards Islam, but at the same time, I never saw myself becoming a Muslim, and that's why I find it interesting. Like, a couple of people have said to me what you said today, as in maybe I embodied or maybe I spoke out for some of the principles that Muslims believe in, but me myself, I never saw it. It wasn't inevitable in my mind, at least. But, so in terms of practical terms, I had a few close friends who were Muslims. I read an English translation of the Qur'an, and I couldn't find anything to argue with. I couldn't find anything in the Qur'an to say this doesn't make sense, or this doesn't agree with this, or this is incorrect, or this is inaccurate. So I said to myself eventually, if you can't argue with this book, the second ayah of Surah Baqarah, right in the beginning of the Qur'an, says, ذَلِكَ الْكِتَابُ لَا رَيْبَ فِيهِ هُدًى لِلْمُتَّقِينَ. This is a book with no doubt in it, then why not believe in it? And I remember I started, it was during Ramadan. I actually came just here to East London Mosque one day for Taraweeh. This is still before I'd become a Muslim. I said my Shahada. I prayed Taraweeh a couple of different nights. I prayed Taraweeh, and I said to myself, Jody, why are you praying something optional and then you're not praying the salat, the prayers that are compulsory. So subhanallah, listen to this for something funny. By the time I sat down and said my shahada, I was already praying my salah. I was already fasting Ramadan. Okay, I hadn't been to Hajj, but
wow,
subhanallah,
that is amazing.
It's funny, isn't it? And even
That's so funny.
I was sitting with one brother, one imam. He said to me, "Why do you want to become Muslim?" I said, "Well, look,
I already am it."
I said to him, I didn't know what to say. I said, because I pray 5 times a day now. I fast Ramadan. He said, why are you just coming today?
Wow, subhanallah, that's funny, man. But
you know, everyone's different, but for me, I'm always trying to fight against arrogance. I'm talking about within myself.
Yeah.
I'm always trying to fight against arrogance, or it's kind of like I know better mentality. Yeah. And I remember I had friends telling me about Islam, encouraging me, but right until the last moment, it's like I didn't want to take it from someone else. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, of course. But alhamdulillah, that's amazing to hear. What's even more amazing, let's talk about this. So, okay, you actually, and again, a lot of people might not know this, so after becoming Muslim, as you said, you were already, mashallah, traveling anyway, but you traveled to Mauritania, and you ended up staying there for a good, let's say, about 1.5 years, right?
Yeah.
Which that in and of itself
beautiful experience.
Yeah, I could just imagine. That's what I want to talk about. But within that time, so what was your purpose of going? Because within that time, subhanAllah, you not only did you pick up Arabic, I mean, I guess you didn't really have a choice, like we said, because in Mauritania, they don't speak English, they're not speaking any other language, they're speaking Arabic, right?
Yeah.
And then, I haven't been Mauritania, but, you know, from what I've heard, obviously, even the conditions there, you're not going to be living in a 5-star, you know, apartment.
You're not living in 1 star, let alone 5 star.
Okay, fine, half a star then, right? So, you know, you're literally in the middle of a desert, right?
The stars in the sky when you go to, that's the only stars you're
that is literally, okay, subhanAllah. That's what I'm saying. So you went there, but you picked up Arabic and you dedicated this time to the Qur'an. And for someone that hasn't actually been Muslim for that long, if you think about it, I mean, 8 years or so.
Yeah.
MashaAllah, I mean, within that time to have travelled, to have picked up Arabic, which many born Muslims are, you know, like craving, okay? And then not only that, but MashaAllah, to have memorized the Qur'an within that space of time. Again, which, you know, born Muslims, we're talking about people whose mother tongue is Arabic, they are craving to do. That is amazing. That's super inspiring. Just tell us about that whole experience or what that was like.
Bismillah. Look, since I became a Muslim, one of the first things, the first intentions that I had in my mind and in my heart was that I want to learn this Qur'an. I want to memorize this Qur'an.
Yeah.
And I remember, so before I became a Muslim, I could speak some conversational Arabic, but I didn't know how to read or write in Arabic. And I remember specifically when I was in Venezuela, so I'd just become a Muslim, going into mosques, going into masajid, and seeing people come in, sit down and pick up a Qur'an, pick up a mushaf and start reading it. And thinking to myself, wow, I wish I could do that. Just walk into a mosque, pick up a Qur'an in Arabic and just start reading it. It was amazing to me. And do you know what I think? I don't know where I've heard this saying. It's a saying that I read somewhere, saying that someone who knows how to, not specifically about the Qur'an, it's just a general saying, someone that knows how to read and doesn't read is no better than someone who doesn't know how to read.
Makes sense.
And subhanAllah, like, think about that. Like, if you're an Arab or you're someone that's learned how to read the Qur'an from a young age, think about that. There's some people that struggle so long just to be able to read Alif Lam Mim. If you've got the gift that you're already able to read Qur'an and you're not reading it, subhanAllah, come on, man.
Subhanallah.
Come on, like, you don't even have to learn to read it, just read it. Just sit down and read it.
True.
You don't have to learn Alif, Ba, Ta, Tha, Fatha, Kasra, Dhamma, Shadda, Sukun, Tanween, Mad. All you have to do is sit down and read it. So alhamdulillah, you're right. It's a big blessing that in a really, really short amount of time, I went from that, alhamdulillah, to not only reading the Qur'an, memorizing the Qur'an. And all of that is a gift that Allah has given me, and I'll always be grateful for it, inshallah. So
how long did it take you, by the way, to memorize?
To memorize. This is going to be the title of the video, inshallah.
God.
2 weeks, even though. So that is I think he memorized the Quran in 2 weeks, and he's in a wheelchair.
We're gonna have emotional music and the backing it.
And then she comes out in the background. You know what? It's quite hard to, because I learnt some in the UK.
Okay.
On my own, around, say, 10 juz roughly, and then I went to Mauritania. The first time I memorized in Mauritania was quite quickly, say a few months. But then I went over it again, and something I'd really advise young people that maybe doesn't get mentioned as much is that with memorizing Qur'an, revision is actually a lot more important and a lot more time consuming than learning. 100%. So, mashallah, if you're able to read Arabic and you've got some kind of system for memorizing, then memorizing 1 page or memorizing 1 ruba or 2 pages, whatever it is, might not necessarily be that difficult, might not take you that long. The important thing, and probably I even made mistakes with this as well, is the revision and the consistency in revision. So I remember in Mauritania, they had subhanallah, they had a principle in Mauritania that any part of the Qur'an, if you can't sit down now and recite it, without checking, without reading it over, without looking at it, then you haven't memorized it.
Without any preparation? Without
any preparation. Let's say if you can't do it, so say for example, alhamdulillah, I teach Qur'an now. Here in the UK, and sometimes when I have new students, their parents will tell me he or she has memorized 5 juz, or they've memorized 10 juz. But in Mauritania they say, okay, you've memorized 10 juz, sit down and recite the 10 juz. And if you can't do that, you haven't memorized it. And it is a bit like, so maybe it's a bit tough or a bit harsher than what we're used to. But it is a good way of ensuring that you memorize, because if you think about it, if someone asked you to recite Surah Fatiha, you would never have a problem. If someone asked you to recite Surah Nas, you'd never have a problem. You're never going to forget it, even if you haven't recited it for a long time. So yes, the advice I'd give to other people in terms of memorizing Qur'an is don't rush, because the revision is more important in a way than don't be discouraged at the same time. Try to keep going, but the revision is really, really important. If you've got 1 juz or 2 juz or 5 juz and you keep revising them to the point that you And I promise people that with enough hard work, you will get to this point when there's, it's one of the nicest feelings to be able to sit down without looking at the Mus'haf and recite Qur'an for half an hour, 1 hour, 2 hours. It's an amazing feeling. Wallahi, it's an amazing feeling.
Is.
But it takes dedication and hard work and perseverance.
Definitely. And you know what, guys, it's official that according to the principles in Mauritania, I'm not a real hafiz of the Quran because I have to prepare. If you tell me to start reading right now, I need to prepare. But you know what? Well, I can imagine what would have really helped as well with that process, like, because this is the norm in places like Mauritania. Is it Mauritania or Mauritania? I don't know which one to say, man.
I'm not the boss.
All right,
I'm not the boss.
We'll go with Mauritania since you said it now, right? So, because we could say when a person goes there, you're so detached, especially from devices, right?
Yeah.
You're literally in the middle. So it's just like I hear crazy stories of like kids there that are just memorizing not just Qur'an but like Sahih al-Bukhari for like just playtime for them. It's just nothing.
You know what? That's so funny because the way you say crazy, so it's not crazy. It's true. Wallahi, I remember. For most of my time there, around a year or just under 1 year, I was living in a very, very, very remote place. Even by Mauritanian standards,
Wow.
It was remote. And I remember meeting other Mauritanians who were shocked at where I was living. I'm talking about a place where the water would come, they'd bring it from a well every 2 days. So every 2 days, you get 2 large containers of water, and that was what you had for 2 days.
Well, for like drinking, washing, everything.
For drinking, for cooking, for washing, for whatever. It's 2 large containers, but that had to last you. There was no electricity, there was no, all I can say is that it's about as far from our reality as you can imagine. And so the studies would be from Saturday until Wednesday.
Okay.
And then Thursday and Friday, you'd have 2 days off.
That's your weekend.
That's your weekend. Thursday and Jummah, Thursday and Friday. And I remember some of the young kids who were either, a couple of them had just completed Qur'an. They were around, I'm talking about kids that are 9, 10, 11 years old.
Okay.
Because they like I said, they didn't rush things. Like if they're learning Qur'an, they'll do a small amount, small and consistent. I remember some of them on their days off coming to older students and asking them to write poetry, like lines of famous Arabic poetry, for them to go and memorize for fun. Because they got into that, if you practice something a lot, the brain is a muscle, right? If you train it enough, then you can do amazing things like that. So it's funny, like for them, in Mauritania, memorizing the Qur'an literally is a starting point for any student. And in fact, if you go to something that I think a lot of people have found going to Mauritania, is that if you go to a what they call a mahda, like a village or somewhere to study, and they'll ask you what it is you want to study. If you haven't memorized Qur'an, they will be very, very almost insistent that you begin with Qur'an. And that's expected from everyone. Before you, maybe you'll study the basics of fiqh of tahara, fiqh of salat, of zakat, of hajj, the basics of Ramadan. But apart from that, they really, really focus on the Qur'an as a starting point.
Oh, so that's like the prerequisite. That's the condition. Like if you want to go further, just memorize Qur'an.
It's like mashallah, and I think it's a good principle to have, not only for studying but for life as well. Subhanallah, nowadays I think we prioritize so many other things, even other forms of education. But I certainly believe that the Qur'an is a good place to start. It's a guide. It's literally guidance for our lives in every aspect. And sometimes when you don't give Qur'an the time and the effort it needs, and you leave it, your life becomes very busy with other things, and you don't have time. So I think it is really good to start with Qur'an and finish with Qur'an.
I mean, it must have been a life-changing experience for you going there. I mean, again, I can't imagine. I just feel like when I think about that, I just feel like I can't hack it,
Shabir, Mauritania was life-changing. I have to say, it was. And before I went, everyone that I asked said that it was very difficult living conditions, and it was 10 times more difficult than they said or than I imagined.
Wow.
Why it was an amazing personal experience for me and personal journey for me, I literally drove from London to Mauritania.
You drove there?
I drove there in 2015.
You're crazy, man.
When I went to Mauritania, I got in a car, I drove to Mauritania.
Okay, how on earth did you do? How could you just drive to Mauritania?
It can be done, my friend, it can be done.
How long did that take?
So with stopping, it took, I had a couple of days of rest in Morocco, and overall I think it took me 9 or 10 days, including that. So
sounds like a very short, easy journey then.
That's it. Well, I'll take you
next time. Sounds like a first-class journey right there.
We'll see how easy it was. So via Spain, via the whole length, to the length of Spain, and then the length of Morocco. You go through Western Sahara, you go all the way through Morocco, and then you arrive in Mauritania. And something I was thinking about the other day, I remember the first time driving to Mauritania, and the last part of the journey, let's say the last day before you get to the border, you're driving through the desert. So it's very, very, very sparsely populated, and you're driving through, you're driving hundreds of kilometers without really seeing anything or seeing anyone. And I remember I didn't really, I'd had that, I thought that you could get a visa on arrival at the border of Mauritania, but I wasn't 100% sure. It was like I tried to research it. It's quite hard to find information at the time about Mauritania, about the visa process. And I remember just that last part of the journey, just making a lot of adhkar and making a lot of dua while I was driving. Don't worry, I wasn't looking at a phone or something like that, but just to myself, making adhkar, making dua. Ya Allah, make this journey easy for me, help me to get across the border. It's a place I've never been to before, I'm on my own, I don't know the situation. And, there's a hadith, I believe, saying that the person that struggles to follow a path of gaining knowledge, Allah will make the path to Jannah easy for him. Something amazing. That's what we're trying to do at the end of the day, is to struggle in this life so we don't have to struggle in the akhirah. That's what we're all trying to do. And I just always remember that time, because, it's it's one of those times where you're going into something unknown, something completely unknown. The first time I travelled to Mauritania, I didn't know much about the country. I didn't know anyone there. I didn't know where I was going to live. I didn't know where I was going to study.
Wow.
I didn't know I didn't know I knew a little bit of Arabic, but I didn't know the local dialect, the customs, or anything. I just had this idea in my mind. I really want to learn Qur'an, and I really want to memorize Qur'an. And, a few people had told me Mauritania is amazing for learning Qur'an, but it's a very, very difficult, tough, really hard. I can't even put it into words.
I can just tell.
Literally, imagine the first day I was in the desert. It was 48 degrees, and this isn't. By the way, this isn't Dubai 48 degrees, air conditioning, everything.
Yeah.
This is, you're in the middle of the desert. There's no electricity, and I remember this is a really good. Kind of amazing for me to remember as well. I remember the first day saying to myself, and I'm not, I don't try to be negative, but I remember saying to myself, I will not last here more than 2 days. I won't be able, I said, let alone memorizing Qur'an, I can't even live here, let alone studying and putting in so much work. And after 2 days, I said, alhamdulillah, I'm definitely not going to be here more than 1 week. And after 1 week, I said 2 weeks, and I just kept going like that.
Kept stretching it.
So sometimes in life, even if you have a long-term aim or a big plan that you want to achieve, sometimes in life, we just have to take it one step at a time. Otherwise, it can be overwhelming. And alhamdulillah, I managed to memorize the Qur'an.
Alhamdulillah.
And Allah made that easy for me. Alhamdulillah.
Don't tell me you went by yourself, by the way, all of this.
I went myself, my friend.
You drove
there myself.
Yourself, yeah?
Yes. Wallahi, I drove from London to Mauritania.
Seriously, how?
9-10 days. Everyone was telling me not to go. So I remember, you know what? I remember people saying, come on, at least take someone with you. I say, who wants to go and live in Mauritania?
I know, right? That's what I'm saying. Whose crazy friend went with you? Tell me that. Let me find out who your friend was. But you went by yourself.
You know now, alhamdulillah, biggest blessing in my life, I'm a father. I've got a son, mashallah.
Mashallah, tabarakallah.
And it's so bad. Like, I never let him do the things I do. Like, it's bad, isn't it?
We'll see in a few years, yeah? What's his name?
Ilyas
will send him to Mauritania, get him to drive himself.
I'm sure, and it can be like a challenge. I'm sure he's the first Jody McIntyre in the world.
Jody McIntyre, okay.
Have you ever met one?
I haven't met one, no, I haven't met one.
I think he's the first one, inshallah.
Inshallah.
Ilyas Malik McIntyre.
Ilyas Malik McIntyre, mashallah. Well, I hope everyone who's listening makes a special dua for Ilyas McIntyre.
That he becomes Hafiz of Qur'an. And that you respect his parents.
That is a key one. That's a key important
Otherwise, he's going down.
You're going to ship him off to Mauritania for a year.
That's happening anyway.
That's happening. That's a standard training for him. Subhanallah. You know what? It's this whole story, everything we're just talking about, it reminds me of what we spoke about earlier. Going back to that, people of determination.
Mashallah.
Honestly, mashallah. That requires what you did. Requires a lot of determination, a lot of patience, a lot of sabr, a lot of willpower. And alhamdulillah, you managed to do it. And I think even your Instagram page, very interesting. Even the name, your handle, very interesting. Disabled people can. That's very interesting. And I just follow some of your posts. Disabled people can have children. Disabled people can recite the Qur'an. And you just show it's very insightful. Tell us why you chose that specific handle quickly.
I thought I'd get more followers. Because honestly, you were talking about my experiences of prejudice and discrimination, and honestly, I'm not making this up. To this day, it's something that I've always experienced. People, even people that are on my side, even people that, believe in me and encourage me, sometimes saying that I can't do this or you can't do that, you can't do this.
Yeah.
And I think, why not focus on what disabled people can do? Because some disabled people can do a lot of stuff, mashallah.
Yeah.
Some disabled people can do so much and can contribute so much. So, I know maybe people will say, we knew that already. We already knew, but it's not meant to be like a, it's funny that sometimes I've read some comments, and mashallah, I know they've got good intentions, and they say things like, brother, you are not disabled. Don't call yourself disabled. You are able to do. But that's the point of it. It's not meant to be a negative thing. It's just, if it can benefit even one person can benefit from it, or feel inspired, or feel encouraged, or feel motivated, is saying disabled people can do this, so can you.
Absolutely.
Inshallah ta'ala.
Absolutely. And one thing, as we're coming to the end now, one thing I always knew this, but I think after meeting you and speaking to you, it just kind of reinforces that, which is that, sometimes when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when He takes something away from you, and whichever form, however that may manifest, He always replaces it with something else. He always gives you something else in a different area. And I feel like with you, what you've shown and what I've learnt from you today, if I'm going to take one thing away, is that we've spoken about
my physical abilities.
Ability. We've
replaced
spoken about
with
that.
being really handsome. Thank you for the compliment.
That as well, okay? Brother Jody, that as well. May Allah bless you. But there's that, and just the fact that, subhanallah, Allah has blessed you with other abilities, giving you the ability to complete your memorization in 10 months, having that, replacing it with physical and mental strength, willpower, traveling by yourself, going out, exploring the unknown. SubhanAllah, Allah has blessed you in many different areas, with activism as well. Honestly, it's very inspiring to see. And
you mentioned earlier, you said something about some disabilities not being visible.
Yeah.
And this is really important. Look, wallahi, one thing I've learned in life, not just about disabilities, but all people, all human beings, everyone in this life is struggling. Yeah. Wallahi, you won't meet one person that isn't struggling, one person that isn't going through pain or going through difficulties. We always see our own problems as an isolated cause. You might be going through something and you think, this situation is unique to me and no one can understand this and no one has been through this. Wallahi, everyone's struggling. You might see someone that, and social media has multiplied this times 100. You might see someone and think their life's brilliant, their life's great, everything's perfect in their life. Everyone's got difficulties they're going through, and sometimes when you do hear about those difficulties, you think, subhanallah, I don't have anything to complain about. So, you're right. Allah gives different people different abilities, and all we can do is say alhamdulillah for what we have. All of us have abilities, all of us have disabilities. But all I'd say is that, just work with what you have.
Alhamdulillah ala kulli hal. Brother Jody, it's been an absolute pleasure. I don't even know where time's gone. I don't know where that hour has gone.
It's gone. It's never coming back.
Exactly, it's never coming back, but I don't regret it.
Oh, that's so sweet.
May Allah bless you, bro. Honestly, very inspiring. I'm so glad we managed to have this conversation today.
It's nice to see you.
Yeah, man.
Lovely to have a chat.
Alhamdulillah. And
until
I'm sure
next time.
Exactly, definitely until next time, and I'm sure our viewers and listeners benefited from this. Do please check out the amazing work that brother Jody is doing, especially on Instagram and everywhere else, mashallah, and keep him in your du'as. Keep our little Ilyas McIntyre, the first ever one, perhaps, in your du'as as well. And be sure, of course, to subscribe to the Feed YouTube channel, and drop your comments below. Let us know what you thought about this episode. Let us know what you would like to see in the future with these podcasts, inshallah, because we're coming up to 1 year of the podcast already, subhanallah, with your du'as and your supports and all of your efforts. Alhamdulillah, we have come and we have the opportunity to bring people like Brother Jody on this platform, mashallah. May Allah bless you all, and we are going to end it here. Keep us in your du'as, and from myself, Shabir, your host, from the Feed team, from Brother Jody, until then, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.